But what do you make of this? Because you're talking about cheating, and in my head, I'm thinking that when I see like trans women in women's sport, I get quite angry at that. You know, I have nothing against somebody who's trans. You know, it's up to you. It's not my business. But I get really, really angry when I see trans women competing against women because they're not women in terms of biology, which is sport is all about bodies. Surely, what's your view on all of that?
First, I'd say I think a lot of people are very frightened, especially females in sport, to talk out about this without being offensive or offending anybody, and rightly so. It is a tricky subject. I am all for fairness in sport, regardless of what gender you are. I am for natural-born females having their own category, and it's female sport. Now, the greater conversation is to be inclusive and diverse. How does sport or society cater for a different category that isn't the norm, I should say. And so that's the conversation. How do we accommodate transgender men and women in that category? I don't know the solution, but that's the conversation. You know, when you see little girls who want to emulate their sports stars in whatever sport, tennis, motor racing, athletics, swimming, whatnot, you know, if they're not starting on a level playing field, if they're going to be against, you know, a boy who's gone through puberty, because the advantages there are so great, and the sciences have come up and shown that there is an advantage. I just think the conversation needs to be around how do we deal in society and elite sport, because this is recreational and elite. It's from top to bottom. How do we deal with it in society to make it fair and inclusive? And I don't have the answers to that, unfortunately. But I agree with you, Anna. It's a tough subject that a lot of people don't like to talk about, in this case they offend or upset.
Well, I'm all right with it. I don't see why they just can't have their own category. Yes. I don't see what the problem is. Have your own category because it's not fair on the women. You know, like you probably won't find a trans man competing against men, because that wouldn't make any sense. Because I mean, you never know, but it's unlikely that they would beat a man only because they are natural-born women. So I don't see why people are having such a difficulty at just having like a separate category for trans athletes and one for women and men, or an open category that you can, if you want to go in, you can. But I don't see why.
I think what the problem is that it's probably terminology, and forgive me if I get this wrong. So female women, we're male female categories, and transgender women. So it's like, are they transgender females or transgender women? And is obviously, if you're going to use correct grammar, that's what it should be. I do think though, what potentially this could open up for, if there wasn't a separate category and transgender women were allowed to compete in the female category, natural born females, I think you would probably end up seeing in a generation or so's time the potential for maybe gender doping. I don't know. That, you know, there's always so many connotations here, that there's unscrupulous people in the world that might think this could be an advantage or a money maker. But it's just a discussion that needs to be had to have fairness, inclusion for all. And I just don't feel there's been that sensible discussion. It seems so simple, and to say what you're saying, Anna, just go, this category is for transgender women.
But it is.
But I don't think it's actually all that simple.
Why?
It sounds simple, but I don't think it's that simple. However, I agree with you. I just think the wider discussion is how does that fit into society with recreational and elite sport? Because, you know, society has to reflect what's happening in elite sport, what it should do. So it's making sure that's correct.